Hello, my name is Benjamin Richards, and I will be presenting my lens presentation for CIS 488, going over the imagination, economy, and balance lens. Let's get right into it. The topics, as previously stated, will be the imagination, economy, and balance. The game in question and in focus is going to be From Software's Elden Ring. And that will be our introduction, laying the foundation. As previously stated, Elden Ring is developed by From Software and published by Bandai Namco. You should be familiar with these makers as they have been made of the Dark Souls series, Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice, Bloodborne, and Demon Souls. Elden Ring, developed by these two, is a Souls-like dark fantasy open-world RPG, and this series has culminated a cult following by the fans of these developers' games. They're known for their ludicrous difficulty and wonderful level design. Elden Ring is going to be their take on their Dark Souls series game in an open-world setting. Games within the Souls genre are known for their difficulty and getting to know the plethora of enemies, the layout of the world design, the attributes of the player, and overcoming monstrous bosses and monstrous odds. Alright, let's go on to the next one. The first lens is the imagination lens. Welcome to Elden Ring's world, the lands between. Within the world of the lands between, the Elden Ring is the symbol of the Golden Order that prevails over the land, with the Great Erd Tree as its protector and surveyor. With Elden Ring, the player will nevertheless be within an eye shot of the Great Erd Tree, which dominates the world that they are meant to be in. It will be in almost every direction that the player can see. The player will often understand that they are meant to head towards the Erd Tree's direction, even if not told directly by the game. Moreover, scattered among the lands between are secret caves and locations, wandering enemies, points of interest, and NPCs with questlines to further explore the world. Elden Ring leaves the player in an unfamiliar world that takes a fantasy medieval setting and lets the player imagine where they can go in this vast world. It's really up to the player's decision. Exploration in Elden Ring provides a sense of wonder as they come upon new regions, enemies, and game mechanics that they'll stumble upon within their playthrough. Furthermore, the variety of enemy types within Elden Ring allow the developers to incorporate all sorts of creatures with unique attack patterns, damage types, and damage resistances that the player must accommodate for. What the player must understand is that the exploration of the game is indeed the progression of the game that in turn inspires the player to venture forth, finding new areas to overcome new obstacles. This will allow the player to find almost any creature that can sustain unique attack patterns, damage types, and damage resistances that they must accommodate for. The scope of this lens is reused over and over and is a part of the gameplay loop of Elden Ring, where the moment the player thinks that they have seen it all there is to see, the game provides a whole new area that was locked away after progressing through the world and story of the game. Lastly, for the imagination lens, the story of Elden Ring intertwines with the player's imagination of what this world has become and what their objective will be. Left vague and mysterious, the player accumulates the story from the NPC's dialogue, which will come few and far between. With that being said, the NPC's words give depth to the relationship that all beings have within the lands between, and some will recommend you to become Elden Lord by conquering the god within the Erd Tree known as Queen Marika. Your character is what you make it, and what you spec it out to be, as this leans into the RPG aspect of the game. The player thus must make their own story as they set on their very own journey to accomplish what they may fear or what they imagine that they can overcome. This in turn also comes with the character customization and character builds that the player can have at the beginning of the game, which further enhances that fantasy experience and what a player can imagine to be. This answers all the questions within the imagination lens, as the player can become anything that they want to be: a mage, a warrior, a thief, a hero, a new prisoner that's freely broken. Next, we have the economy lens, the universal runes. The economy of Elden Ring is at the very heart of the gameplay loop that encapsulates the player. Runes are the universal currency of Elden Ring and are only acquired by defeating enemies or selling what goodies that the player may have accumulated to merchants. The reason runes are so important is that they are the only way that the player can level up their character by giving them more health, making them stronger, having more stamina, etc. Moreover, the more you level up, the more expensive that leveling up rune cost will be, and in turn, there is more emphasis on finding more runes by defeating stronger and stronger enemies. Thus, Elden Ring's economy is majority skill based on the performance of the player's combat ability. As the player slays more enemies, the game economy scales with difficulty. A rule of thumb in Elden Ring is that the harder the boss's difficulty, the greater rune rewards will be. Another key mechanic of runes is that upon player's death, they will drop all of their runes. These runes can be picked up at the location of where the player last died upon respawn. However, if the player were to die again with the lost runes still not being picked up, that player's rune indicator will be dropped to 0. Hence, the Souls-like genre of Elden Ring. The gameplay loop of Elden Ring is to overcome odds beating bosses and making your character more powerful to beat more powerful bosses. And that is the integral presence of runes. Furthermore, players can opt to spend their runes on items, weaponry, armor, spells, and incantations. This can be done at a merchant shop, as pictured here. This, along with a robust item crafting system, allows the player to spend any leftover runes after leveling up to be spent on items. Lastly, the player can also upgrade their items with the smithing system, where a player's item can be improved in damage and overall use. These take materials from the world, called smithing stones, and a hefty amount of runes to fully deck out an item. As pictured on the lower left is a upgraded item. In the top right, we have a smithing stone, a common item to upgrade that weapon at the smithery with Master Hugh, an NPC you can interact with to upgrade your weapons. And then the final lens, the balance, a Souls game. Answering the one and only question of this lens, does this game feel right? Is the most complex question to answer for Elden Ring. To start, Elden Ring does not have a difficulty slider, no easy mode, and every player will start at the same base difficulty. As the game is open world with bosses aplenty, the difficulty scale of Elden Ring varies based on the region of the game you're in. With the freedom to go almost anywhere in Limgrave at the start of the game, the design of the world constrains the player to go on a diverse set of design pathways. Based on your region is where you'll find this concept. In the starting area of Limgrave, the player will have encounters with beginner enemies that will familiarize the player with the core mechanics of the game, that being casting spells, dodging attacks, damaging foes with their weapon, and managing your healing items. This is in stark contrast to the region of Caelid, where you'll find enemies like this. Caelid is a home to a place of monstrous enemies that really challenge the player and can be seen as a deterrence due to the difficulty spike. However, this entwines with the fact that the balance of the game comes down to a player developing their skills and also making their character more powerful. Finally, the best part of any Souls-like games comes down to the bosses. The bosses in Elden Ring are meant to be the testing grounds of a player's skill within the game, and they are meant to be an obstacle the player must overcome to proceed into certain areas of the game that progress the story, to receive hidden items, or unlock important mechanics of the game. One of the first bosses the majority of players will embark on is Margit the Fell Omen. Margit teaches the player that the depth of the combat system in Elden Ring, and he is only difficult if you are not familiar with that system, as he is a marker for what is ahead in the castle he guards. For example, when Margit makes an air attack, the player should perform a dodge roll before Margit slams into the ground to avoid damage. This entail is where the nature of balance within Elden Ring lies, and is what sets it apart from other titles that make the in-game balancing master class. If a boss proves to be too difficult, instead of having the player bash their head into a wall until they get it right, they can venture to another location, level up, and come back ready and more experienced than they were last time. This allows the player to venture out, find dungeons and enemy encampments where they'll acquire more runes and find items and interactions that will assist them on their journey. One of these items is called the Spirit Calling Bell, which will allow the player to summon a spectral ally to assist them in combat. That being said, there are a plethora amount of spirits that the player will find across their journey, and that will best suit to their playstyle, which will affect the overall balance that the players will come in contact with these enemy interactions. The balance of Elden Ring falls upon the player's skillfulness of the item and combat system and their willingness to overcome odds to try again, as is the nature of any Souls game. Elden Ring teaches you that you have the ability to overcome these odds, to learn bosses, and explore the world, making Elden Ring a truly masterfully balanced game.